Hello, everybody, and welcome to today's English Literature and Composition video review. I'm Susan Barber from Atlanta, Georgia, and if you've been with us a while, you'll know I have a co-teacher, but he is absent today. He missed class. I think he went upstairs to have lunch with my college-age daughter who's home from school. I did want to say that yesterday was just like a reality check for me during these times, because here in Georgia, we found out that school buildings are going to be closed for the remainder of the year. And we will be doing online learning, but it's just not the same. And it just really brought me back to these really unusual times that we're in. And so today I'm wearing a shirt that all of my students signed, just feeling like I want to have them close to my heart, and I'm going to miss spending time with them. And I know a lot of your teachers are feeling the same way. I know a lot of you are just feeling upset and sad, and that's perfectly normal. And I just want to emphasize that while your teachers are obviously there to help you with AP Lit, don't hesitate to reach out to them if you're struggling just with processing all of this, because all of us are here to help you not only with the content that we're providing, but also just with life in general. So feeling heavy heart for all of our seniors today, especially here in Georgia and other schools that have officially closed for the year. So with me today, as always, he did show up today and is not absent from class, Mr. Escobar.
How are you guys? I wanna echo, and I'm Carlos Escobar from Miami, Florida, from Felix Varela Senior High School, and I think it's important to echo what Ms. Barber is saying. As much as we want to focus on the exam, and as much as we want to focus on delivering instruction, for us, all of these videos, as I'm assuming it is for you, based on the emails I received, to some extent they're therapeutic, right? It's a moment for us to turn off the news and maybe disconnect from that for a little bit and connect to the normalcy that we once knew. And it's important that we, yes, prepare for the exam, but it's also important that we remember our humanity. And the first video, I remember I told you to email your teachers and connect with your teachers and thank them for what they've done for you. And now, with so much time in our hands, it's time for us to think of a way to give back, right? But we also understand that the most important thing for us to do right now is to stay home and not go out. So this is a good moment to connect via email, to connect via video with family members, with teachers, with people who have impacted your lives. And reach out. I mean, you're reaching out to us. I don't even give my email information, and I'm not on social media, and yet I've seen amazing emails, and I've seen amazing videos out there that you've created. Um, but I think that's important for us to remember our humanity, and for us to remember that we are there for each other. So you definitely reach out to your teachers, reach out to your friends, and connect. And I also feel bad for the seniors, like Miss Barber was saying. This is such a pivotal time in our lives, but the important part of senior year is not necessarily attending the prom, but the memories that you make at prom. And we're building memories here as well. I was zooming with my seniors last night, and we laughed, and I'm sure that as the year goes by, there's going to be moments where they cry, and not me, because I don't cry, right? But we are building memories. They're just different memories from the ones that we expected. So hang tight, everyone. Be there for each other, and every day at 12 o'clock, tune in, because we're definitely here for you. As always, we're going to begin with the homework. And yesterday's homework was about literature and how childhood and adolescence are portrayed in works of literary merit. We'll start by reading the prompt. In some works of literature, childhood and adolescence are portrayed as times graced by innocence and a sense of wonder. In other works, they're depicted, to move something here. I apologize.
As times of tribulation and terror.
Correct. Focusing on a single novel or play, explain how its representation of childhood or adolescence shapes the meaning of the work as a whole. You may select a work from the list below or choose another appropriate novel or play of similar literary merit. Avoid mere plot summary. Now, Ms. Barber, maybe here we should focus on this last statement, or actually the penultimate statement here. You
Yeah,
may select a work from the list below or choose another appropriate novel. You want to share your email?
It's really interesting. I got an email from Julia Robbins at Sherwood High School in Maryland, and she said, I have a book, Purple Hibiscus. Do you have a copy there?
It's right here, so I'll
yes,
put it up
Purple
for everyone to see.
Hibiscus. She said, I read this and I think it fits perfectly for the prompt, but it's not on the list and it's not part of the approved AP curriculum. But we want to say that whatever book comes to your mind, if it answers this and if it has enough depth that you can really explore the themes and the meanings and the characters in this book, then absolutely you can use this. Just to reiterate what Mr. Escobar and I said yesterday, we coach our students when they receive this, a prompt, a question 3 prompt, to just cover up this list and think about the books that pop into your mind. So if Purple Hibiscus comes to your mind and you can solidly outline how you would answer that, then of course that works and you can certainly use that. So don't feel like this list is the end all be all list of books to answer the prompt. It's there to help you in case you get stuck or your memory needs jarring a little.
And I think a lot of times the question comes up with contemporary writers. You know, we all feel safe when we turn to Shakespeare. We all feel safe if we turn to Morrison, if we've turned to Henry James. You know, these are obviously authors who have already made a name for themselves. Some of them have survived the test of time. But when you pick up a contemporary master, right, a contemporary artist, it's scary sometimes. But a good rule of thumb is, you know, if your teacher has been teaching this course for a long time, then your teacher has a good pulse, I think, on what is a work of literary merit. That's not to say that if you're a beginning teacher you don't. That's not at all what I mean. But just to reassure students that, you know, if your teachers are teaching these books, they've probably already wondered, you know, will they work for Q3? Are they substantial enough, right, to qualify as work of literary merit? And Adichie is definitely, I mean, she's a rock star right now. So go ahead, and those of you who have never read Purple Hibiscus, maybe now's when you pick it up, right? If you've read Things Fall Apart, this is a great companion piece, as a matter of fact. So if you enjoyed Things Fall Apart, and you want to look more into the Igbo people and you want to read more about like what happens when generations follow, where things fall apart left behind, then Purple Hibiscus is one of those books that'll just grab your attention.
I love Purple Hibiscus because, and I know this is not like our book review show, but
start us talking on a book and we might never stop, right?
I love Purple Hibiscus because I think it has a lot of depth to it, but the novel is not that long and it's very accessible. So it's a great book to read.
Yeah, so definitely use it, in other words, right?
Yes.
And for your homework, you had to write an introduction. And we asked you within that introduction to go ahead and highlight what you consider your thesis to be. Some of you may have struggled last night and thought, you know, this thesis is more than one sentence. Is that okay? And we're going to address that today. Absolutely, your thesis could be more than one sentence. But we're going to cover all that once we get into the guided practice today. But let's look at some samples. Let's look at some potential introductions and thesis statements for this prompt.
So here's some, I just threw this question out to my students and asked them if they would respond with some thesis statements. And these are a couple of things they gave me. In The Handmaid's Tale by Margaret Atwood, the narrator, Offred, uses memories of her adolescence as a blissful escape from her oppressed everyday life. These flashbacks help contribute to the themes of power, loss, and hope throughout the book by showing a stark contrast to the present setting of the book, giving Offred something to live for, and helping to characterize Offred in the society in a truthful light. So again, this ties back to her memories and the purpose her memories serve there, but then it also branches out and talks about some broader themes within the book, themes of power, loss, and hope. And this really sets this writer up to explore those themes throughout her paper. Let's go to the next one, maybe. And here's one for The Glass Castle, which I think is interesting because it's a memoir, which, you know, we're kind of opening up to that now a little bit, but still works because it talks about her hardships in childhood, but then also this meaning of the work as a whole, or broader ideas in the novel that a difficult childhood does not necessarily create a weak individual. So I love the direction that this essay is going. So the next one, in Richard Russo's Empire Falls, have you read this one, Mr. Escobar?
I have not read this one, no.
I have not either. Empire Falls.
I think I have it, so maybe that's my homework for tonight. So we'll figure it out.
Teenage Tick holds everything together. From the way she rationalizes her parents' messy divorce to the perseverance she exhibits when a friend commits a horrible crime, Tick is a testament to the strength of adolescence. As a kid who experiences more hardship than most adults, she sets an example for the rest of the novel's characters who otherwise dwell on insignificant problems. So again, this idea of she has had a troubled adolescence, but she is going to turn inward and overcome and then lead the way for others in her life. Set up very well. Finally, Scout Finch is portrayed as an innocent little girl at the beginning of Harper Lee's classic To Kill a Mockingbird. Throughout the book, Scout loses her innocence as she's introduced to the issue of racism in her community and outside world. Scout's exposure to the evils of racism creates the theme of social inequality in the book. So again, answers the part about the troubles in the childhood, but then what does that mean in the context, the social inequality, and this totally sets this writer up to explore that in her paper. But even if you have questions about this, today's lesson is specifically on writing thesis statements and what does that look like.
Yeah, and when you wrote your introduction, we asked you to highlight specifically what you considered the thesis statement to be. I know when I'm working with students, and sometimes when I'm working with younger students, when I'm working with my sophomores, if I have them write an essay, and I'm walking around the room, and I stop by a desk and I ask the student, "Where's your thesis?" Right? A lot of times they do this. They just span the whole introduction. They're like, well, it's somewhere here, right? Or because they've been trained to do so, maybe they just point to the last sentence of the introduction, whether or not that is a statement that is functioning as a thesis statement. So we asked you to highlight it, and perhaps after we've gone through our discussion of thesis statement, we can go back to your homework and verify whether what you highlighted truly functions as a thesis, and whether or not to see if it's missing any of the components of a thesis statement. I think that'll be really helpful, especially because you're going to have to do this again for homework tonight. So today, as you've heard already, we're going to be talking about the thesis statement. And we're going to develop a thesis statement that conveys a defensible claim about an interpretation of literature and that may establish a line of reasoning. So there's a lot of key words here, I think, that we need to discuss. We need to have a defensible claim. What exactly does that mean? Perhaps, I mean, I don't know if it's probably really terrible practice to define something by its opposite, but that's exactly what I'm going to do right now. We're not talking about summary, because a summary is not a defensible claim. If I tell you that Jack and Jill went up the hill, and then I ask you for, a defensible claim about that, and you tell me, well, there's, this boy Jack and this girl Jill, and they went up the hill. There's nothing to defend. There's nothing to argue. You don't have to convince me of that. You're just giving me summary. A defensible claim is when you take a stance, when you see something about what's going on with the different elements of that book. We've talked about a lot of elements already. We've talked about characterization. We've talked about the perspective of the narrator. We've talked about the structure of the plot. We've talked about the structure of the text itself. When you look at how all those elements are functioning to convey an idea about a central idea in the text, and you're now going to state what that idea is and what that connection to those elements are, that's when you have a defensible claim. And this whole notion of establishing a line of reasoning is pivotal. Maybe now is a good time for a plug for tomorrow. Tomorrow, we're going to spend a lot of time talking about this idea of establishing a line of reasoning. And we're also going to look at the rubric, and we're going to talk about why that is so pivotal. I mean, we're talking about whether you're, in the upper range or the lower range of that middle row of the rubric. If you know what I'm talking about, you're following along. If you don't, then even more importantly, you should tune in tomorrow so that you understand what we mean by that. But establishing that line of reasoning is clearly important. And what you do in the thesis sets you up for that line of reasoning. And that's what we're going to prepare today, so that then tomorrow we can talk about the line of reasoning. Our purpose is this: readers establish and communicate their interpretations of literature through arguments supported by textual evidence. You're arguing your claim, you're providing textual evidence as support. And these are the fundamentals of a thesis statement. And if you're missing that and you're grounded on summary, then it's simply not enough. And we're going to see it in action now.
So let's think about a thesis. And I got this idea or this concept, these visuals from my friend Brian Stabnick when I read a post of his a few years ago, actually. But here are a couple of different ways to think about a thesis. The first picture you see on the left is a thesis is like a roadmap, and it's going to detail the route that your thoughts take. Now, a thesis can certainly do this, and I'm sure a lot of you, particularly in younger grades, we may only refer to it as this in Georgia, but my students say, I'm going to write a thesis. Is it okay if I write a thesis with the chicken foot? And I'm like, the chicken foot? What do you mean? And they're like, it's going to be point 1, point 2, and point 3. Well, a lot of times this is what this roadmap type of thesis looks like. While that is a thesis, we want to really steer away toward that and push you to thinking about a thesis like an engine in your car. And so an engine is actually it gives the car the power to go forward. And so we want to move from thinking about, we want to free you from thinking about point 1, point 2, point 3, but thinking more organically on how can my thesis, what can I write at the beginning of my paper, a statement, a couple of statements that is going to push my argument forward. It is going to propel my argument, and it will kind of escalate as it goes. And I have this thesis serves as a power just embedded in your paper. And it's going to give you the power that you need to move your argument and to move your claims throughout the paper. Go ahead.
No, it's a great way of thinking about it. And the other thing that I think we need to recognize is that we may be at different levels of proficiency here, right?
Right.
If you're just starting with writing sophisticated essays, if you're just starting to write long essays, if you're just starting to write timed essays even, then that chicken foot, I think you called it, right?
Is that just a Georgia thing?
It might be. It's definitely not a Miami thing. I don't think it's a Florida thing. Maybe not. Maybe it is. Maybe I'm just late to the terminology. But
because it looks like a chicken foot.
Right.
Yes.
Yeah. The three-pronged thesis.
Yes.
Right. But so if that chicken foot works for you,
exactly,
and that's all you know how to do for now, then continue, right?
Correct.
But we don't want you ever, especially because we're talking about sophistication now. We don't want you to think that that's the end all. There's a few questions that in my class just irk me so much, like how long should the essay be? How many sentences per paragraph? How many paragraphs? The truth of the matter is that the length will wholeheartedly depend on the complexity of your argument. If your thesis statement is very, very dense and complex, then you might require not how many paragraphs, but how many pages, right? When you go to college, you may write 10, 15, 20, 30, you're writing a master's thesis, you're writing a dissertation, you're writing a book at that point. So it's not about how many prongs to the thesis. At that point, you're definitely talking about the engine. And with the engine, we're very clear in a car. The purpose is to move forward. Well, we're very clear in the essay as well. It's to move forward, but it's to move forward with that claim that you're making, that interpretation. And it will not take three parts of the chicken foot. It's not going to take three prongs. At this point, you might be arguing 5, 6, 7, 8 topics. Now, granted, within the 40-minute essay, you may not have time to write 10, 12, 15 paragraphs, right? But it is important for those of you who are already prepared to move on to that next level to understand that you don't have to, by definition, stick to 3 points. In fact, you might have 2 points,
exactly,
right? But you can very easily have 4 or 5 points as well. It depends on your level of proficiency, the complexity of your thesis, and how quickly you can read and annotate and then write the essay. And that's at the end of the day, that's what's the limiting factor here. We don't have unlimited time.
So what exactly constitutes a thesis? And here I've actually pulled a rubric, row A from the rubric with the analytical rubric for AP Literature. Not because this rubric is the end-all be-all for good writing, but this rubric does give us a working vocabulary and some guidelines that are true for all writing. So when we look at this, what constitutes a thesis? If you look in row 1, it gets the point if it responds to the prompt with a thesis that prevents a defensible interpretation of the selected work. So a thesis needs to answer the prompt. It can't just be about whatever you want it to be. And I've read some really good essays, but if they don't address the prompt, you've not done your job as a writer. You have to address the prompt. It has to be defensible, like Mr. Escobar was just talking about. You have to have an opinion on the text in front of you. So you're going to have to bring your insights into it. And finally, it's going to include some interpretation of the work. This image that or the language we keep going back and forth between, we're looking at small things and then thinking about how this ties to a broader context, small, big, small, big. So your thesis should address some of the bigger issues, the bigger meanings that we see in the text. Now, what is not a thesis? That's probably terrible grammar. So let's look at the next slide. These things, a thesis is not, and you can look and see in the left-hand column, you don't get points for this. And again, it's not about, I mean, we do want to prepare you to pick up the thesis point, but this is just good rules for writing in general. So a thesis, if a statement cannot be defended, if it's not defensible, if it doesn't have any of your original insight in it, that is not a thesis. If it just restates the prompt, not a thesis. If it's a summary of the work with no original insight, not a thesis. And like I said, if it does not answer the prompt, it's not a thesis. So we are going to look at some, oh, wait, I think I have one more picture. And this is going to make us hungry at lunchtime. So the brownies. So you have a brownie on the left and then look at the brownie on the right. Both of these are, both are brownies here. Both of these are going to kind of satisfy that chocolate craving that you have. But if you look at the one on the right, this brownie really extends our brownie experience, and it gives her just a much more satisfying way, a richer experience with the brownie. So like Mr. Escobar said earlier, we're all at many different levels. And if you're at the level right now that you bake brownies and you put it out like that, then you do that and you do that well. And you keep doing that until you're ready to take another step and experiment and grow as a writer. But some of us are in the place that we have been making brownies like this for a long time, and we need to push ourselves to go forward and just have a richer experience with our thesis statements. So we're going to look at several examples today, and you're going to see a wide variety of thesis statements that have been scored by the new rubric. Oh, I'm jumping ahead of myself. That's been scored by the new rubric, and you'll see just the wide variety of things that can constitute a thesis. Before we get to that, let's talk about some specific ways to craft a thesis statement. I like to tell my students, divide the prompt into questions and answer those questions. So, you know, if we're looking at a prompt, well, what is the work first? Who is the character? We're going to be looking at a prompt about a gift today. What gift have they received? How is it both a blessing and a curse? And so we develop these questions from the prompt, and then my thesis should answer those questions. And then that sets me up to give an essay full of evidence and analysis that expand on those answers.
Right. And this is an opportunity for us to model how many of your teachers are saying the same things that we're saying, but they're using different language. Ms. Barber talks to her students about looking at the prompt and developing questions and answers. And those questions come from the prompt and the answers must be found in the thesis. What I tell my students is essentially the same thing, even though I approach it a little differently. I tell them when they look at their prompt sheet, right? Imagine this is the prompt sheet. When they look at their prompt sheet, they are to take the prompt sheet and with their pencil write numbers identifying the different tasks. So if they have to, let's say, select a character, they have to discuss the relationship between the characters. They have to talk about how that relationship conveys something about the meaning of the work as a whole. Then you might have 1, 2, 3. When they develop their thesis, then they have to make sure that they answer each of those tasks within the thesis. Now, of course, sometimes we tell students to do this, but then, you know, we say, okay, start writing, go, and then you forget everything we say. So there's different steps that I take to ensure that students can do this. One might be to color code this, right? So have different colored highlighters for each of your tasks. Then when you write your thesis, color your thesis in. If you can't match the colors, then clearly you're missing something from your prompt, from your task that you identified. So it's just a way of having students pause and look at that prompt carefully, because without a good thesis, without a good engine, then your essay really will wobble at that point.
Some other ways that your teachers may have explained this or told you to approach a thesis. Some people give templates like, what is the main topic being addressed here? Then give a strong verb and then end with your interpretation of the work as a whole. And there are really like 100 different templates you could give. So this might be a way that your teacher has told you to approach the thesis statement. Or TPR, identify the topic, give your position on the topic, and then your rationale or your reasoning. And you want to always be sure that your thesis answers the so what question. You don't want to wait until the end of your paper and have this big ta-da moment. This is what I've been building for. You want to go ahead and give that up front, then spend your whole paper defending that and explaining that. So go ahead and give the big ta-da, what you're going for, up front, and then we'll spend the rest of the time explaining that. So now let's jump into some thesis statements and look at them.
All right, for the thesis statements, we're going to be working with the 2018 prompt. This prompt reads, many works of literature feature characters who have been given a literal or figurative gift. The gift may be an object, or it may be a quality such as uncommon beauty, significant social position, great mental or imaginative faculties, or extraordinary physical powers. Yet this gift is often also a burden or a handicap. Either from your own reading or from the list below, choose a work of fiction in which a character has been given a gift that is both an advantage and a problem. Then, in a well-written essay, analyze how the complex nature of the gift contributes to an interpretation of the work as a whole. Do not merely summarize the plot. For those of you who are used to the old prompts, we're now adding the language that will accompany prompts from now on. And from now on, all three question types will include bullet points following the prompt. And these are the bullet points that we would find for an open-ended question. In your response, you should do the following: respond to the prompt with a thesis, provide evidence to support your line of reasoning, explain how the evidence supports your line of reasoning. Notice how line of reasoning comes up twice. Watch tomorrow's video, and use appropriate grammar. So these are reminders that I think we all should know, but they're definitely there for you to tick off as you write your essay to make sure that you have satisfied all the requirements. So working with this prompt.
I love this prompt, by the way.
Oh, it's great. It's great.
Yep.
We have this first attempt at a thesis. And the question will be for us, should this thesis earn the point? Right? Is it a thesis statement or does it fall short of being a thesis statement? And the story of metamorphosis, and all these examples are spelled in context. Okay, these are actual student samples. In the story of metamorphosis, the main character undergoes a huge physical change that impacts the entirety of his life. Although many saw his change as purely a burden, the change revealed a lot to the main character, which could have been perceived as a gift. You know, this student is using some of the language. I see the word gift. I see he's talking about the main character. Who is the main character? What is the gift exactly? Is the gift the physical change? Although many saw his change as purely a burden, who are the many there? The change revealed a lot to the main character. What did the what I think we need to see is there is so much ambiguity here. The student is certainly using words from the prompt, has certainly selected a text, but what is the argument here? What is the, who is the character? What is the gift? How is the gift both a burden and an advantage to this character? We simply can't answer any of those questions based on this thesis unless we draw inference. And that's not, as a reader, I shouldn't be placed in that predicament. You should be telling me what the essay is going to be about. I shouldn't have to infer what you mean. So this thesis will not earn the point.
So the next one, a novel that has a character with a literal, A figurative gift was the main character in Frankenstein. He was given a gift that was a burden, but also an advantage and a problem. And basically, this just really restates the prompt and it adds the title of the book in. It doesn't even identify the title. It doesn't identify the gift, and it doesn't make a defensible claim. So this is an example of what we talked about earlier, something that just restates the prompt.
The next one is in the story of The Tempest by Shakespeare. There is a wizard who was casted away with his infant daughter to an inhabited island for years. I'm trying to give this a point, but it's all summary, isn't it? What is the gift? How is it functioning? What's the meaning of the work as a whole? I'm not getting any of these answers right now, so it does not get the point.
Yeah, just no original insight in that one. The picture of Dorian Gray by Oscar Wilde shows a young man, Dorian Gray, who does not age, and although at first this seems to be a blessing to him, it quickly begins to burden him and arise problems. So this one actually does earn the thesis point. It identifies the gift. He doesn't age. And then it talks about first, this was a blessing, and then it quickly becomes a burden and causes problems to rise. Even though this awarded the point, when I read this, I'm like, this is like cutting it a little too close for me. I assume this student in the essay later ties this to the meaning of the work as a whole. And so while this would get the thesis point, I'm not sure that this particular thesis statement sets you up to write a really solid paper. So
and I think this takes us back to your brownie picture, right?
Mm-hmm.
This would be, it's the brownie on the left, whereas the brownie on the right could lead to a stronger essay. I think maybe because of time, and we want to get to some of the debrief questions, what we're going to do is we're going to scroll through the rest of these thesis statements. I'll pause for like 3-4 seconds. So those of you who are watching us live could take a picture of the screen, and those of you who will watch us later, then you could just pause the video. The rest of these thesis statements will receive the thesis point. And the way that we know this is because there will be a character identified, there will be a gift identified, and there will be some sort of claim about how the gift is both a burden and a blessing. So here are the other examples. We have one for atonement.
And this does receive the thesis point.
We have one for Mrs. Dalloway.
Again, this receives it.
Even though it's short, but the length does not matter here. It's not about how much you write, but about the quality of what you
And I love
include.
that they just, big picture, strictly enforce gender roles. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Wait, we're not talking about them, right? Okay.
And Invisible Man. This is Ralph Ellison's Invisible Man.
And this is really that brownie with the ice cream and the caramel and the little cookie.
Absolutely.
And you see, I mean, as a reader, whether an AP reader or a college professor or whatever professor, you read this and you know this is going to be a great paper if they deliver.
Got it. Right, absolutely. So for a debrief and summary, this is so important, guys. You have to start your essays with a thesis statement that is solid, because although you might think that's only 1 point on the rubric, it's really setting you up for that middle row, which is where the bulk of the points are earned. How do you write a thesis statement that clearly articulates a claim about an interpretation of literature? How do you do this? You do it by taking a stance on the work. You are interpreting. You are saying something that you came up with. This is where you are important. The work is already done. you are delving into it and you are finding something. I tell my students, you know, there's a golden nugget out there. You need to scuba dive. You need to get down there. You need to delve into the text and find that golden nugget and retrieve it. And when you do, you're going to want to proclaim it. And that is your thesis. And the second question is, how do you preview the reasoning of your argument in your thesis statement? Perhaps by considering how your reasoning is organized. What you state in your thesis will mark the progression of your essay. We're going to speak about this aspect a little more closely tomorrow, but your thesis is the roadmap. Your thesis is that delineation of your essay. So how you write things is critical.
So for our practice tonight, we are going to look at this prompt, the 2019 prompt. In his 2004 novel, Magic Seeds, V.S. Naipaul writes, "It's wrong to have an ideal view of the world. That's where the mischief starts. That's where everything starts unraveling. Either from your own reading or from the list below," and we did not attach a list, so from your own reading, choose a work of fiction in which a character holds an, quote, ideal view of the world. Then, in a well-written essay, analyze how the author's portrayal of this idealism and its positive or negative consequences contributes to an interpretation of the work as a whole. Do not merely summarize the plot. So we are going to start tomorrow. We're going to open tomorrow looking at these thesis statements, some examples of it. I would encourage you to write a thesis statement and share it with your teacher and say, hey, you know, we just watched this lesson on thesis statements. Does this work? So y'all talk about this as a class. And then in tomorrow's lesson, we are going to be using this prompt also to be talking about the line of reasoning. So we'll be working with this prompt all day tomorrow.
Yes, and let's talk about tomorrow for just one more second here.
Oh.
And let's remind you about a few things and then some new information. We know that we're going to talk about line of reasoning. The only thing more important than a thesis statement is the line of reasoning in your essay. So please reach out to all your friends, reach out to all your students, and make sure they tune in tomorrow to the video. And the second thing is the College Board's big announcement is tomorrow, April 3rd. We will know exactly what our exam will look like. And Ms. Barber and I will be sharing that information with you during our live video session. So during that session, we're going to discuss what the prompt will look like, and hopefully we'll be able to address any questions you may already have. So it's kind of a big deal. Okay. We hope that you do join us, and we know that you are watching. One of the things that we hope to share with you tomorrow is where some of our listeners are located. We want to talk about the fact that we are getting these responses, these emails from every state, basically. And like I said yesterday, even from Bolivia. So the idea that people in other countries are listening is just incredible. Maybe today I'll get an email from someone in Europe or Asia, and we could include that, so we can cross the ocean. That would be really, really cool. So join us tomorrow, and again, do something nice for someone today. Let's focus on our humanity, and let's not focus on the memories that we're not making, but let's focus on making special ones despite our current reality. Take care, everyone.
Goodbye, seniors. We love you.